Hey everybody, Mike B back with yet another video about helmets because it's still really cold out. There's a bunch of snow and ice and I don't want to go out and make shooting videos. I know a lot of you guys are waiting for that, and I even had some people unsubscribe because helmets aren't interesting. Yeah, well, that's your own thing. I'm not going to go out and shoot when it's this cold. So you get these videos. It's something to learn about, even if you don't care. It's kind of interesting. I like to learn about things that I don't really care about too. It's just useless knowledge that eventually becomes useful. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about helmet graffiti, like specifically outside graffiti, right? Because it doesn't really seem to show up until fairly recently. Helmets themselves are a fairly recent reintroduction, but we're going to just start at World War I, and I'm going to kind of go over some of the painted helmets that you're going to see and let you know that they're not usually something that the soldier did during combat. I'm talking about things that when you're fighting or when you get a little bit downtime with fighting, you're going to be, doing things. That's kind of what graffiti I mean. Like you're doing it for out in the field. There's kind of some way to express your identity because you're all the same. And so with World War I, you see a lot of like the U.S. painted helmets. They got the units on them. They got some of them have like where they were, and some of them are painted camouflage. Walt Disney did that. He took part in painting up U.S. and German helmets and then selling them to the guys that were getting on the boats and going back home, and made a lot of money that way. A lot of money. So a man after my own heart, making money off helmets. Anyway, so yeah, a lot of those, or about 99% of the 99.9% of those are going to be a post-armistice thing. Well, when the American Expeditionary Force was leaving off of occupation duty in 1919 through 1920, late 1918 included, every soldier, or most soldiers, were issued a new helmet and a new gas mask, like an SBR, as kind of a symbol that they had been there, and excuse me, steak burps. As a sign that they had been there, and Americans had all these extra, piles of equipment that were just now making it for the 1919 offensive. So like, what better way to get rid of it? Souvenirs. So a lot of the guys, like on the way back, would paint them, with, here's the unit patch that we all agreed on, and here's where I was, and here's the dates and all that stuff. So it wasn't technically done like in theater, which is still cool. Like, I'm not saying they're not cool at all, they are. But you don't really see a trend of like people writing on your helmets. You also got to remember that the average Joe didn't really have access to markers, first of all, or pens. Pens were kind of a commodity back then, and then ballpoint pens came out, and then they were more accessible to normal people. So, and also you're not really wearing a lot of cloth covers, which we'll get into in a bit. So World War II comes around, right? And you don't really see a lot of graffiti on helmets. I'm not talking like unit markings. That's not technically graffiti. That's just a unit marking designator. But as far as like personalized things, maybe somebody drew Kilroy on their helmet, but it's still considered defacing government property, which is very interesting. Like you can get in trouble for it. It depends on how hardly they want to prosecute it or how much they want to prosecute it. But like technically you can get in trouble for that because it's not yours, it's the government's. But anyway, you just really don't see a lot of graffiti on helmets in World War II. Again, no covers really. On the South Pacific, sure, but still with that, you really don't see a lot of graffiti. With like the Marines or even the Waffen-SS, they didn't really do much graffiti. The Germans in general didn't. I've seen a couple Soviet helmets, SSH-40s originals, that have like Cyrillic written on them. I don't know what it says, obviously, because I don't know the Cyrillic alphabet, but you can see a couple of them like in white paint. God, I forgot. I would totally link it if I remember where I saw all these. There was like a collection some guy had. Anyway, you can tell it's original, and I don't know what it says. Probably like, screw Nazis, whatever. Who knows? I want to go home. So Korean War pops up, right? I'm just going to do U.S. wars, the wars the U.S. were involved in, or else this video would go on forever. But the U.S. has been involved in pretty many wars and conflicts recently, so we'll be able to cover quite a bit of ground. So as far as the Korean War, the regular olive drab M1 covers were just coming out in like 1952. And then the ceasefire was signed, and then bam, they were put in the warehouses and stuff. A lot of them were sold to our allied countries that were using M1 clones. So even with that, you still don't see a lot of writing on those. Now, we go forward. We'll just go to 1965 in Vietnam, right? So this is just, again, I don't claim to be an expert. I wasn't there. I never claimed to be there because it's impossible. Even though I'm wearing this stuff, I think jungle fatigues are the most comfortable thing ever. And I decided to wear this because that's where I start seeing the most graffiti I think ever anybody's seen on like helmets, up to that date. So in 65 to late 66, you're really not seeing a lot of graffiti. It might just be like a penned in like somebody's name or where they're from on their cover too. That's the big thing is you had the Mitchell pattern cover, or some people had the olive drab in World War II duck hunter, but the majority of them wore the Mitchell pattern. And you see a few pictures, you know, they've got, you know, I think the very infamous one. I don't know if, I think that was in 67, so we'll get to there. But yeah, you don't really see it a lot at first. And then in 67, you start seeing this thing where people are writing, it became a trend, and I'm not exactly sure how, but I know why. It's because it, you know, allows you to personalize a piece of equipment that you're probably going to be wearing most of the time, and it's going to be with you, and it just kind of allows you to express yourself, and everybody sees it when they see you, because obviously it's big and hard to miss. So it's pretty interesting how that started. In 67, 68, you start seeing a lot, like, people were taking markers, actually, and doing like artwork and, you know, whatever else, and just writing snarky shit on their covers, and, you know, a lot of cuss words. And that famous picture, you know, War is Hell with that Marine, I think that was in 67. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Very, very famous picture. That's where you start really seeing it, is in 67 to 68. I know a lot of Vietnam vets watch my channel, and if I'm wrong, correct me. I'm just doing very general brushstroke statements, so I don't have to make a 40-minute video on this. But that's where I kind of notice it in photographs from my research. And again, not an expert, but that's just where I start noticing it. So the trend is 66 or 65, 66. Now we're talking 67, 68. By the end of 68 through 1973, that's where you're going to see just a lot of people. I'd say, I'm just going to throw a number out there. I'd seen for like line infantrymen in the Marine Corps, the Army, and some of the Navy guys. Some of the guys that were out in the bush, you know, not taking away from anybody's experience, but like a lot of pictures were of those guys going through the jungle and whatever. And I'd say at least, well, yeah, we'll say 3 out of 5 that I've seen have got at least something written on their helmet. In what capacity, whether it be like a tally mark, whether it be like their name, whatever, it's just, it's something. Any kind of graffiti counts as graffiti. Clean covers, there's a lot of them, but there's not as many as there are ones with graffiti on them. So I did this when I was younger. I did the graffiti on here, but I talked to several of my Vietnam vet friends, a couple of which have since passed, but and they were telling me what they had written on their helmets. So I kind of compiled that. One of them had this verse on there, and then it kind of ends not like it does in the Bible, but and the other one liked to, let's say, partake in a little Mary Jane action. So he had smoke dope written on his, but I just wrote smoke it. So it's, you show up to a reenacting event, it's not like a huge, you know, smoke dope thing. And I got the little peace sign. And then this one is actually, now if you're of Vietnamese or Asian descent, don't get mad at this. This is literally what, like, I saw a picture of my friend who was in Vietnam, had this written huge on the front of his helmet. I just wrote it very small in the back. So that's it, he said, was written on his, Duncan Campbell, was written on his helmet. And I was like, well, you know, it's, at the time I can understand where your point's coming from, but nowadays, you know, everybody gets triggered, so yeah, you can flag this for hate speech or whatever, but it's a historically accurate quote that I chose to put on here. And I only have 3 quotes, because that's what I see, is it's usually not the tattooed, you know, full sleeve that you see. But anyway, so enough about Vietnam right now. That's where you start seeing it as far as Americans. Now, it becomes really trendy with other countries. I've noticed in like the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, right? Specifically in the Balkan conflicts, right? So Yugoslavia breaks up in 1991, all hell breaks loose, a bunch of ethnic and nationalist groups, and I mean, it's just so complicated, it's insane. Anyway, there's a lot of fighting going on, and they're using a lot of leftover Yugoslavian equipment, right? So they're using the M59 helmet, the M5985. Well, some of them have helmet covers, some of them don't. Now, I've seen graffiti on it. I actually have, if you look up my older videos, I have a Yugoslavian M59 helmet that's got graffiti on it. It's just red paint, and it's like a bunch of kind of illegible shit on the left side. And then on the right, it says cricket in Bosnian. So it's really weird that it was like in red, so it's really bright and noticeable, but it's got some guy's name on it. And I try to keep some examples like that of graffitied helmets for my personal collection, because it's kind of cool to have something that a soldier was that bored and decided to, you know, take the time to do this, you know, just for shits and giggles, whatever. So you'll notice a lot of that stuff from the Bosnian, Croatian, well, not as much Croatian, Bosnian, Serbian ethnic issues they had in the 90s. You see a lot of pictures and videos of people and examples of people graffitiing up the covers and the helmets themselves. It's been a trend recently. I've seen a lot of like German helmet covers, the Flecktarn ones, American helmet covers from the late 80s, the early 80s, the Woodland ones for the M1. They have a lot of like penned in stuff, smart ass comments, I'm 007, quotes from James Bond and whatever. And that's pretty interesting too. It seems like a primarily American and like Balkan thing, which, as a whole from what I've observed. So I found that pretty interesting. Anyway, you fast forward to today, Iraq, Afghanistan kind of thing. There's still graffiti on helmets. It's not as like widespread, but I mean, I wrote on mine when I was there. A bunch of my friends did. I saw other people that were writing little things, and so it's still prevalent to this day, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. So I hope that kind of explains a little bit like when helmet graffiti really started becoming a thing, and like what to expect like when you're actually collecting what kinds of helmets are going to have graffiti on them and stuff. So all right, hopefully this video is not too long. I tried to get out as much info as I could as quickly as I could and tried to condense it. But anyway, Vietnam's where you're really going to start seeing it. Balkan countries, and yeah, they're not the only ones. Other people, African countries have done that too with graffiti, but those are harder to find because they're still using them. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you learned something. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell if you have, or if that even does anything. And yeah, just let me know if you learned something and you got any questions. I'll try to answer. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just somebody who's been loving helmets for 21 years and collecting for 21 years. So I've been doing research on these damn pieces of steel for that long, and hopefully most of my info is accurate. So thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you on the next vid.